On the 26th of May, 2013, the Gascon 4 sank in difficult situations. An immersion plunge group on the Levec Toucan support vessel were brought in to recover the collections of the 12 mariners on board. What they cannot deny is that one man injured caught in an air pocket in a lowered vessel 100 feet beneath the waterline on the 26th of May 2013. There are 6 immersion jumpers dealing with board the Levec Toucan. The Levec Toucan is a plunge support vessel, which is contracted by an organization called West African Endeavours. The jumpers are laying oil pipes at a profundity of around 70 meters or 230 feet when the call comes in exactly 65 nautical miles from their position. A towing boat, the Gascon 4, which is one more vessel worked by West African Endeavours, has upset and sunk West African Endeavour's contacts. Colby Verrett's the jump manager on the Levec Toucan and requests him and his group to recuperate the bodies from the 12 men on board. While this isn't rigorously an aspect of their responsibilities depiction, the immersion jumpers realize that sooner or later in their vocation they might be approached to play out this bleak errand. They likewise realize that it would be them one day, and another mariner or jumper would do likewise for them. They presently have 2 issues. The primary issue is that the jumpers are feeling the squeeze to plunge at 230 feet, and the Gascon 4 has soaked in 100 feet of water, or 30 meters. They can't just climb to 100 feet in light of the fact that their bodies have assimilated nitrogen and helium comparable to the functioning tension. It'll require right around 20 hours for them to securely rise to 100 feet and permit the overabundance helium and nitrogen to escape from their bodies. This cycle is called decompression, and I'll cover that in a smidgen more detail later in this video. The second issue they have is that boats are slow. 65 nautical miles is around 75 miles or 120 kilometers away. For the majority of us, when we ponder driving that far, it would require a little more than an hour. Yet, the ocean has been prepared by the very storm that has sunk the Gascon, for thus it'll be painfully slow to get to the mishap site. As a matter of fact, it'll require close to 17 hours to arrive at a speed of around 4 bunches, or not miles each hour. You and I can stroll comparably quick as this boat will go in the blustery circumstances. Fortunately, the cruising time to the area of the depressed flatboat will take around a similar measure of time as the decompression. Thus they secure their work locales, bring the plunge chime at hand, and join it to the living space. Then, at that point, set forthing. 12 group on board. The area is 40 at around 0500 on the morning of the 26th of May 2013. Harrison O'Kane, the cook on board the Gascon 4, gets up to make breakfast for the team. He opens his lodge entryway and advances toward the restroom. The ocean is harsh, thus Harrison prepares himself when everything of an unexpected. The boat is banged by a wave that is far bigger than different waves moving through. The power of the wave moves the towing boat, and as it tumbles off the peak of the wave, it collides with the ocean with such power that it breaks the frame of the boat, and water quickly surges in. Harrison tears open the entryway and surges towards the crisis. Get away from Fix, where 3 of his group individuals are now attempting to escape before her arrives. Water surges in and fills the path, gulping the other 3 team individuals and washing them away. The towing boat Gascon 4 has been hit by a rebel wave in difficult situations. It promptly upsets and sinks. She's one of 3 pulls towing an oil big hauler. Their central goal is to balance out the oil big hauler in the difficult situations. One of the boats she's cruising with conveys a trouble approach. Channel 16. Channel 16 is the radio channel that all boats screen on the off chance that something occurs adrift. You put out a pane approach Channel 16, and you realize that all boats are paying attention to a similar channel, so they'll get your call for help. The Gascon 4 synchronizes so rapidly that her skipper can't settle on a misery decision himself. The area of this mishap is around 14 nautical miles off the bank of Nigeria, and a helicopter is promptly dispatched to look for survivors before the day. Over on the 26th of May, no bodies have been found, and the quest for survivors is dropped. West African endeavors presently reaches one of the boats in their armada, the Levec Toucan, to demand that its jumpers find the depressed vessel and quest for bodies. The Levectican shows up on the scene. Late in the day, on the 27th of May, the ocean has quieted and they can begin their pursuit. They have the directions for where the Gascon Force sank. However, they actually need to find her on the ocean bottom. The sea flows have pushed her off her most recent surface area. The Levectic can has 6 jumpers, which they split into 2 groups who work non-stop. They send a plunge ringer down to 30 meters or 100 feet. 1 jumper stays in the plunge chime to offer help and 2 jumpers into the water subsequent to finding the Gascon 4, which is lying topsy-turvy in the sand. At 30 meters, the jumpers currently need to find a way into the submerged boat. The Nigerian shore is famous for privateers, as its standard convention to get and lock all seals in the boat and all inward entryways. That implies the jumpers need to break into the Gascon 4. The jumpers are submerged specialists, as they're furnished with devices and submerged welding lights that will assist them with breaking the locks and gain passage in the wake of opening an outside hatch. They presently need to begin the hazardous errand of entering the boat and looking from one lodge to another. The Gascon 4 is topsy-turvy and laying dubiously on its masthead. The masthead is the highest segment of the boat that holds the boat's radio signal and its banners. It's anything but a underlying scaffolding. However, presently it's holding the heaviness of the vessel, which makes it temperamental in the event that it gives way while a plunge is inside. He could be caught or squashed as it breakdowns. 1 jumper holds up outside to assist with taking care of the umbilical rope into the disaster area, while 1 jumper enters the disaster area to look for bodies. The umbilical is a voice that feeds gas to the jumpers and links for 2-way correspondence with the boat and different jumpers. The quest for bodies is a sluggish cycle. The perceivability in the water is very low on occasion, thus they need to feel their strategy for getting around the wreck. It's a new boat that is topsy-turvy, and they need to remember their direction as they manage the vessel. Many hours they work vigorously, despite the fact that they hope to find dead bodies. It's as yet a spine-shivering encounter to catch a dead body drifting in the dinky water. By the evening of the 28th of May, 2 days after the boat sank, the jump team has extricated 4 bodies. The plunge boss Colby Verrett is coordinating his South African jump group. In the ringer is Andrea Rasmus. In the water, our divers Daryl Starson, who's feeding the umbilical cord to Nico van Heerden, who's about to enter the Gascon 4. The divers are breathing a special guest mixture, which is made up of oxygen and nitrogen similar to the air we breathe, and they've added helium into the mix. This is called tremix, which is common for saturation divers at depths below 20 meters or 66 feet. Nitrogen starts to have a narcotic effect, which divers refer to as the martini effect. The deeper you go, the more drunk you get. Nitrogen is denser than helium, and so helium flows into and out of your body tissue a little more easily than nitrogen and reduces the effects of nitrogen narcosis. But because helium is not as dense as nitrogen, it also conducts heat away from your body tissue more readily than nitrogen. That's why when you breathe helium from a balloon, your voice becomes high-pitched. The helium is cooling your larynx, which changes the pitch of your voice, and so these divers sound like chipmunks. Nico heads into the wreck. He orientates himself and makes his way down the passageway. He enters the officers' quarters towards the bow of the ship. In the gloomy water, Nico sees a hand. A shiver runs down his spine. He calmly reaches over to pull the body towards him so that he can take it out of the ship and bring it back to the surface. But then his heart skips a beat when the hand grasps his, as if the body has come back to life. Nico is startled but quickly regains his composure. If you go and research the story, you'll see some reports that Harrison heard them coming and banged on the boat to let them know he was inside. I don't believe the divers heard his message. When Nico found him, he and Colby, the dive supervisor, are equally surprised, and you can even hear Colby say, if they'd known there was someone alive inside, they would have already started to plan for a rescue, and they would have known what they were going to do, or at least be preparing a plan. Nico can see the survivor is relieved to see him. He's equally impressed that the guy is maintaining his composure. That composure kept him alive for 2 days in a bubble of air in a sunken ship 100 feet below the waterline. We now know that survivor is Harrison O'Kane, who survived for 63 hours in his air bubble. During that time, he's fashioned a small raft to hold himself above the water, listened to what he could only assume were his colleagues been eaten by fish or sharks, and prayed for his life to be saved. In order to understand the problems of bringing him out, you need to break the problems down into short-term and long-term. Short-term is the next few hours, and long-term is the next 3 days. The most immediate problem facing Harrison is that his air pocket is slowly filling with carbon dioxide. With every breath he exhales, carbon dioxide will poison and kill him before he runs out of oxygen. The effects of carbon dioxide at 100 feet are even more pronounced than they are at the surface. The solution is to add breathing gas to the air pocket. But this creates 2 problems. The first problem is the gas mixture the divers are using as Trimix, which has helium, and they aren't sure if it's okay for Harrison to start breathing this straight away. The divers have some time to acclimatize to the helium as they descend, but Harrison's already at depth. After consulting with a hyperbaric doctor who specializes in medicine, under pressure they decide the risk is very low. Harrison would already have absorbed nitrogen equal to the surrounding water pressure. In effect, he's already a saturation diver. Any helium his body tissue could absorb would have to replace the nitrogen that his body has already absorbed, which would be a slow process. No. From the divers descending slowly, the next problem is getting a gas mixture to Harrison. They've got 2 choices. Nico can purge gas from his helmet to freshen the air pockets. This would increase the amount of oxygen in the air pockets and effectively reduce the percentage of carbon dioxide. That sounds simple enough, but the divers have to be careful. The ship's already resting on its masthead, which makes it unstable to begin with. If they simply purge gas into the air pocket, they're increasing the buoyancy of the ship. It's like inflating a balloon underwater. The ship started to float, which will destabilize it, and they risk the ship rolling onto its side and possibly trapping Nico in the air. That's keeping Harrison alive. Could escape any drowns before they have a chance to extract him. They're already preparing a dive helmet in the bell to bring to Harrison, but the helmet is heavy. It's called the Kirby Morgan dive helmets. I'll leave a link in the description of this video so you can check it out. It's the A helmet of choice for commercial divers. Once Harrison has the helmet on, he'll have a breathing supply, but he can't hold his head above water for long. Once he's in the water, he won't feel the weights of the mask, but once he has it on, it's so heavy he needs to go into the water. He can't sit on his makeshift raft with this heavy piece of equipment, but the water's cold. It's not North Sea cold, but Harrison's been trapped for 60-odd hours, and he's already cold, so he can't waste time in the cold water waiting for them to make a plan. So the helmet needs to go on when they're ready to extract him, and not before, which means Nico needs to purge gas into the air pockets, enough to revitalize the air supply, but not so much that it causes the boat to become unstable. Nico also brings a bottle of water to Harrison so he can rehydrate. He's been trapped for days without food and water. The longer-term problem is that they can't simply bring Harrison up to the surface. Harrison's been trapped in an air pocket at 100 feet under pressure. The depth he's at means he has 4 times as much pressure as at the surface. If you go diving and breathe compressed air, the nitrogen in that air is compressed. The compressed nitrogen is absorbed into your body. We all have nitrogen in our body. That's normal, but when you go diving, your body absorbs more nitrogen. For recreational divers, they only absorb a little bit, so they don't have to decompress. Saturation divers absorb nitrogen until their pressure inside their body reaches the same pressure for the depth they're at. Their body is saturated. I'm saying nitrogen, but for this purpose nitrogen and helium acts in the same way. Because Harrison's been under pressure for more than 2 days, his body is saturated with nitrogen, and if he goes directly to the surface, he will get decompression sickness, also known as the bands. That means he needs to come up slowly and decompress over 3 days, and that's precise. See what the hyperbaric doctor suggests. It really is lucky that Harrison has a saturation diving crew with a dive bell performing this rescue. If he had been found by divers on a conventional scuba system, he'd be dead by the time he got to the surface. The only reason a rescue is possible is because of the dival and saturation. Habitat on board the Lievek Toucan Nico helps Harrison put on the Kirby Morgan dive helmet. He then maneuvers Harrison through the passageway of the JASCON 4. From there, Nico and Daryl bring him to the dive bell. The dive bell is sealed to maintain the same pressure, and Harrison is brought to the deck of the Lievek Toucan, where he will stay for the next 3 days in a decompression chamber. Over the next 3 days, Nico stays at his side. He feeds Harrison, administers medicine as prescribed by the hyperbaric doctor, changes his bed linen, and nurses him back to health, while the pressure is slowly released and his body is able to adjust to the surface pressure. After Harrison's decompression is complete, a helicopter flies him back to land, and Nico goes back into the chamber so that he can get back to his job installing oil parts at 230 feet. After his ordeal, Harrison swore he'd never go near the ocean again, but he went on to become a commercial diver and says he loves being underwater.